On the latest episode of Free Marketeers News, we are discussing poverty rates in Venezuela at all-time highs, strikes hit South Africa, and is there reform coming in this country? All of that and more right after this. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Chris here with another Free Marketeers News episode for the week ending 8 October 2021. Joining me on this week's news episode to unpack the craziness that is South Africa is Mr. Dumo Denga. Dumo, how are you?
I'm good and you, Chris, and it's great to be on.
I'm doing well, thanks, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. For those of you who don't know Dumo, I hope after this conversation you will follow all of his work and his colleagues because he is the founder and host of Manpatria, the Manpatria podcast. You can find him on Twitter. You can also find Manpatria there and also their website, which I will link to in the description below. Dumo, jumping right into our first news item. This is a bit of international news, which we don't always cover, but I thought it was important because it might show the direction in which South Africa is going. So, more than 75% of Venezuelans are now living in extreme poverty. This is according to Reuters, and a new study was published there. This is the 2020 to 2021 National Survey of Living Conditions, found that the percentage of Venezuelans living in extreme poverty rose by nearly 10 percentage points from last year, from 67% to 76.6%. Roughly 95% live in poverty when looking only at income levels. And among the factors contributing to such dramatic poverty include fuel shortages and not enough job opportunities. According to Pedro Luis España, who's a sociologist at the Andres Bello Catholic University, it is the absence of opportunities. It is sitting in front of the door of the house doing nothing, not because you do not want to do anything, but because there is nowhere to do it, end quote. So, Dumo, it's often easy to try and draw comparisons between countries and links, but if you look at the last 10, 20 years of Venezuela, nationalization, doing away with property rights, breaking down of the rule of law, do you think it indicates that South Africa could possibly go in that same direction in the future?
Definitely possible. I mean, if you take the actions that Venezuela have taken, that's exactly where you're going to go. I mean, if you're going to, go on a spree and nationalize everything in sight, definitely people are not going to invest. And also another thing that happened in Venezuela was the price controls that they put in the market as well. And that also will encourage people who are selling goods and services not to really sell it in the open market. They may use the black market, and in the black market, the price of goods and services are really high as well. So that also disencourages people to actually, invest as well. So if you put all these rules and everything like that, you're not going to get really much investment. I'm not even talking about outside investment. I'm talking even like people within the country who just want to start something. They won't even see the worth in doing so because the barriers are so high. So with South Africa, it could definitely go in that direction if they do take that path. And they shouldn't. The nice thing about it right now is that even though we're in a bad spot, we can still improve. All we have to do is just remove unnecessary regulations. Let's look at some licensing laws. If you look at now with the COVID-19 crisis, for example, one of the challenges that there was not enough supply of healthcare. And I was like, well, if there's not enough supply, let's get that supply going. And you find that if you look at the laws in South Africa, I think in the Health Act, you need like a certificate of need just to expand your healthcare if you're a private player. And that just really puts the private sector in chains. They can't innovate, and without them innovating, they can't do anything. So definitely, if South Africa takes those actions that Venezuela took, it won't be long before South Africa's in that position. And we don't have to look far. Look at Zim as well.
So, speaking of some hopeful signs, at least, if not implementation, but our next item is on Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. He's been making some very interesting noises since he's come into his position, which I've been surprised and pleased by. But again, implementation matters a lot more than just words. But he recently told the Sunday Times Investment Summit that his overriding aim will be to make the practical reforms in the economic environment that will enable investment, particularly by local firms. So in this broad sphere, a few of the things that he highlighted was, of course, lifting the threshold for embedded generation. We still need to see the permit granting in that area. Will it actually be fast enough, and will it be free of political interference? The second area was the release of broadband spectrum. I don't know when South Africa will ever actually release broadband spectrum to a good level. Third was the green revolution, in which South Africa had no choice but to, quote, follow the global trend, end quote, to maintain the competitiveness of its economy and exports. Fourth, South Africa needs to sort out its logistics. And the fifth point was to change the environment for doing business. He said, we've got to make it really easy to do business. To get a zoning license in East London takes 2 years. To get one in Cape Town takes 80 days. I'm feeling guilty because Cape Town is run by my political opponent, but that is the truth, end quote. I mean, that's pretty radical from a seasoned ANC member and now the finance minister. Do you think this is just a case of trying to sort of placate investors and business, or do you think Minister Godongwana will be one of those trying to push for at least some nominally good reforms in the long run? Will he have that sort of steel political will, as it were?
It's a very interesting question. I think Godongwana, I have to agree with you that when he first came out, he did say things that I liked. First of all, when he said with regards to the social grants, he was even saying that you can't just give someone a grant and expect good things to happen. And I'm paraphrasing him, but he didn't seem entirely in favor of this grant. And I think, given what he said now recently with regards to this green revolution and making it easy to do business and so forth, I think when investors hear that, they get excited, but at the same time, they also look at it and think, okay, is he just saying this for the sake of saying this? Or is he just really, or is he being genuine, So I think investors will be happy. They will, keep one eye on South Africa and say, okay, guys, look, they want to do some reforms. Let's see how well they do. But unfortunately, there is like the elephant in the room with regards to reforms, and that is things like, a BEE, for example, which also disencourages foreign investment. I mean, you saw now with the Competition Commission and Burger King and the Competition Ombudsman and everything like that, those type of situations, investors look at it and think, is it really worth coming in here? Because now, if I want to buy something, it might have to go through a commission, and then they may not approve of it because, I'm a foreigner, I'm not a South African, or I'm not black, or whatever, and that affects the decisions that are made by investors. So I think even though Godongwana is saying the right things, South Africa has a lot of rules in play that already disincentivize investors. And what is disappointing, he didn't talk about that elephant in the room. So I think what possibly he can do to kind of get investors going is saying what he said, but also talking about the elephant in the room. But of course, if he does that, there are political implications. So I think he's just saying what he can say without ruffling too many feathers. But definitely from an investment perspective, it is encouraging to see that. But now it's all about what is he actually going to do? Because so the government has made promises before. They haven't fulfilled many of them. So, we have to just see now. Now he has to put his foot on the accelerator and see how fast he can get it done.
At that same Sunday Times Investment Summit, there were some comments from a few of the private sector attendees, and just one in particular, which I wanted to highlight. So this was Colin Coleman. He was formerly of Goldman Sachs, and he said, and I quote, "The compounding cost of regulatory overreach, barriers on skills, labor rigidities, empowerment ownership transfer requirements, relative cost of levies and taxes, inefficiencies of municipalities, and the hidden cost of corruption, crime, and waste have produced an environment where the returns on capital have declined," end quote. He went on to say that if the economy did not grow, quote, "there'll be nothing to share, no nation to transform, and our national debt will be the least of our problems," end quote. I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think that idea of if you don't have at least some economic freedom, you're not going to have any welfare in the first place. You're not going to have your basic income grant. You won't have a universal income grant. None of that stuff. So at least get the economy growing, right?
Right. I agree with that. So I think that comment is like showing you showing the basics really, that you can't put the cart before the horse. If you want to have these generous welfare programs, you need to at least have an economy that's producing goods and services that are worth using. And right now, if you look at our economy right now, I mean, technically we are doing better than last year, but I mean, that's because we did so bad anyway. That any improvement will, any release of the lockdown regulations is seen as an improvement. So, but it's still not good. It's still not good nonetheless. So the reality is just that we have to get the basics right, and I think this is something that people should understand. You have to understand that when it comes to the economy, what helps the economy grow is freedom. You need to make it easy for people to do business. If you make it harder for them to do business, there will be no business. You can't rely on the big corporates to be providing goods and services to everyone. There are small businesses out there that actually do assist in the economy. They help people. They employ people. They also buy goods and services as well. They pay salaries, everything like that, and they also use other goods and services for their own businesses. So there's this ricochet effect that people are not understanding, and I think that we need to get that message out there. People need to understand that, look, it's freedom. Freedom is the key. And I mean, I may not be a big fan of welfare, but I think that comment was right from that person, that look, if you really want to get these programs going, at least build an economy that people can participate in.
I mean, we can end that episode there with that quote from you. I mean, it's all about freedom. So I don't even know if there's any point to go on. When you have Dumo Denga on your show, then you're gonna get these nuggets like in every comment. So thanks for that. Moving on to our next item is just on strikes, and I mean, this is obviously like a national pastime in South Africa. Like the US has baseball, which is their national pastime. For us, it's striking. So NUMSA and COSATU. NUMSA have an indefinite strike going on at the moment, and this will probably bring the country's steel industry to its knees. They have workers in the steel and engineering sectors have embarked on an indefinite strike over a long-standing dispute on salary increases. The strike might be like the one in 2014, which lasted for 4 weeks and cost the economy 6 billion rand. Shop floors at steel factories across South Africa were abandoned on Tuesday after workers downed tools and embarked on the indefinite strike. Um, the strike involves some of NUMSA's 432,000 workers. For those of you who don't know, NUMSA is the National Union of Metal Workers. Um, and then moving on to our next sort of striking topic is just COSATU, and they called for a national strike against corruption and job losses. So I guess if you strike against those things, you're going to solve the problem. COSATU, of course, is a key ally of the governing ANC party. According to COSATU national spokesperson Sizwe Pamla, the federation is issuing a call to all workers and South Africans to join the strike on Thursday. They can either join the planned activities across the country or uh, withdraw their labor by staying at home on the day. Pamla also said the biggest hurdle in fixing South Africa's problems is the inefficiency of the state and the scourge of corruption in both the public and private sector. Corruption in the private sector has seen price gouging in many areas like retail and pharmaceutical, therefore compounding existing inequality and poverty. Now, luckily, we're recording this on Friday, so the strike was called to start yesterday on Thursday. But interestingly, a new development shows that the call by COSATU for workers to stage a one-day national strike went largely unheeded. More than 83% of staff reported for duty, ignoring an appeal by the Congress of South African Trade Unions, or COSATU, to stay away. A survey of 991 firms conducted by the National Employers Association of South Africa showed. So the NUMSA strike looks to be going ahead. COSATU called for their members to go on strike. People largely ignored them, I think, because they also realize with a 44% unemployment rate, if at the moment you've got a job, you should probably just continue working as best as you can, even if you have proper legitimate concerns. And I think one can talk about a proper role of unions and the role that they can play in a better environment. But just your thoughts on unions and striking in general. Do you think striking against corruption and job losses will solve those problems?
I don't think it will. I think when it comes to striking, look, I'm not a union leader by any chance, just to let you know. But now I'm probably giving them advice. But really, if you're gonna call a strike, you probably have to do it based on salary increases, right?
Okay.
Because I think that for me matters because that's what the workers want. Now, if you're gonna strike for any other political reason, some people are gonna be looking at it and thinking, hey, man, okay, if we strike, the work policy is no work, no pay, okay? And there's no prospect of an increase anyway. And times are bad. We know it. We're seeing it. Our bosses are seeing it. The guy will say the boss used to drive a Merc. Now he's driving a Hyundai or something like that because he had to sell it because times are going bad, So they start to notice all of these things and they're like, you know what? They can strike, but I'll sit this one out. I'll go to the next one when it's for a salary increase or something. Because I think the idea is that if they do strike for a salary increase and no one rocks up to work, it's really going to kill the employer. And then they'll just say, okay, fine, just give it to them. So I think that's probably the logic behind it. And I think with unions as well, I think, in general, when it comes to the unions, I have no problem with unions in general. I think there are good unions out there that do sit with the employer and do negotiate respectfully, and they understand and they try to meet halfway. But then you get those unions that just make demands left, right, and center. And when the employer can't reach those demands, they go on strike. And then eventually they come back and there's no salary increase, or they'll give them a salary increase, but not at the level that they wanted. And I mean, I've seen this when I used to work in other corporates as well. I see this. And I think for me, with unions, if unions really want to be effective, really, they have to, meet halfway with the employer. I think employers want the best for the employees because if the employees are not happy, the company's not productive. And if the company's not productive, they're not going to make money, right? So I think, they need to meet halfway and they shouldn't see it in this Marxist sense, like the employer is the oppressor and the workers are the oppressed, and therefore, the workers can never do anything wrong. So yeah, I think that's my view on unions, and I just think this recent strike with NUMSA and COSATU, they could be effective, but I think we probably might see bigger ones when it comes to salary increases. That's what I think.
Just on that, I wanted to expand a bit on the concept of exploitation. So this isn't specifically related to a news item, but this often gets brought up with sort of wage negotiations, capitalism, quote unquote. Not that we have capitalism if you look at the amount of government interference in the economy. But what do you think about that idea of exploitation? And I mean, I'm setting you up here with my ideological, maybe some would say bias to you, but just that I think it's a bit paternalistic to presume that I can decide for someone else what constitutes exploitation if they want to work for a certain wage. It's sort of up to them to decide, kind of thing. What do you think of that concern for some people, which is legitimate, and how one can best handle that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the definition of exploitation, I think that particularly comes from looking at our lifestyles and then trying to project it on someone else. And then, like, say, for example, someone could be earning, let's say, 40,000 Rand a month. And then he hears that there's this guy who works at a factory and he sweats the whole day and everything like that. And he's only getting like 5,000 Rand a month. And then we look at it and we think, oh my goodness, this is horrible. Like, I don't even sweat that much, but I get paid way more. This is exploitation, And that's the problem. That type of projection creates a massive issue. And as a result of that, the resultant laws, they tend to keep people out of the jobs that they actually need in order to actually improve their lives. Because the guy who's starting off at, let's say, a job that pays, let's say, 5,000 Rand a month, he's not going to be at that level forever. He can increase his skills, do better at some stuff, and he may be the manager one day, or not even the manager, but somewhere else, but still earn more. And I think that's what people forget. Because as human beings, we tend to look at things like in the immediate moment. We forget that over time things change, and sometimes, let's say most of the time for the better. We forget that, and then we kind of like pat ourselves on the back when we make these interventions that are that we think are good, but in the end actually become very bad. So I mean, I think in a nutshell, I think exploitation as a definition, really, can these workers be exploited? Yes, they can, and that's why we have unions who's supposed to just guard that, to keep the workers' interests alive. That's fine. But at the same time, you can't expand the definition of exploitation up to a point where the resultant laws are actually going to make things worse for workers trying to get in, never mind the current workers. So I think we need to have a more expanded view on what actually exploitation is. But I think ultimately, I think the people that define exploitation have too much leeway in this. They're not being called out for the negative effects of their definitions and so forth, and that's a problem, because that puts employers on the back foot and makes things worse for them.
I mean, speaking of that unintended consequences, not just idea but practical, concrete effect. Our next item is on the state of South Africa's youth and lack of skills and education. And President Ramaphosa recently offered his insights into this matter when he said that young unemployed South Africans don't have the right skills. Now, I wonder if there's anything related to that with government-provided public education, but we can unpack that. But the president said that South Africa's most pressing challenge right now is youth unemployment. He was addressing a national teaching conference this past Wednesday, and he said the education sector will need to adapt to help better produce people with the skills needed for the country. I mean, ignore the collectivism. We'll get into that as well. That sort of for the country kind of idea. But he said, and I quote, some of the young work seekers are not well educated and do not possess sufficient skills and previous work experience demanded by employers in the labor market. He went on to say, that places a great responsibility on teachers and education officials, and indeed all of us, to ensure that our schools, colleges, universities, and other training institutions are producing the skills and capabilities that our country needs, end quote. Now, Dumo, one can look at, obviously, tertiary education. You can look at sort of secondary education, and there's different causes of issues there. I think we should focus on the public sector here, because the president is speaking to, I think, a majority of young unemployed South Africans who unfortunately can't afford to go to private schools, for example, where they would arguably get better skills development. They'd also be exposed to more wokeness, so that's another issue in and of itself. But what do you think of his comments, and how, I mean, this is a big question, but how do we reform public education so that South African youth who come out of that system are at least somewhat better equipped? I mean, it doesn't help telling them, quote unquote, that they're going to have free education, tertiary education, when the universities aren't producing the sort of skills and education that they need in the first place.
Well, I would say the first thing that needs to happen is that they need to encourage more school choice, because I think the first thing, what's happening is that among the schools in South Africa, there isn't a great sense of competitiveness. Your education is based on your postal code. I have heard of people that live in places like, Mpumalanga, Witbank, so forth, who they've told me stories of guys committing address fraud because they want their kids to go to a particular school, but they can't send that kid to a school because they don't live in the right postal code. And that is a very problematic thing. If you want to have competition among the schools, I think you should allow at least the parents to choose which school their kid goes to. And that way it will encourage the schools to become better. Unfortunately, that it's not like that. So the government handles all of that. And because of that, you're seeing lower education levels. I mean, you saw, I don't know how old the study was, but it's been going on for quite a while with grade 4 learners. About 75% of them could not read to learn. So they were reading what is on the piece of paper, but they don't know what is going on. Right now, that's very concerning at a grade 4 level, because at that point, you should be able to read something and understand what is being read. And that's not a good thing. So I think, first of all, Ramaphosa needs to look into that. But again, there are political implications as a result of looking into that. Another thing is that then he also needs to allow the private sector to find solutions to this problem as well. Try to find some sort of low-cost private education model. I've seen in some places in Africa they're already doing that as well, where already people like poor people are sending their kids to private schools because they just don't see any benefit in sending them to a government school. So I think allow that to occur. I don't know if there's any regulations against that, but I think ultimately, he needs to encourage that. He needs to probably speak to them in private and say, listen, we have an education problem. We need your help. And I think that'll definitely assist. But the public education system, any intervention, any more overreach intervention in that sector will not necessarily fix anything. What will happen is that you need to allow for more freedoms. And I know one solution that has been suggested is allowing for a school voucher. That way it will increase competition. So therefore the best schools will get the most attention, and the ones that are not so good, they'll either fizzle out or they'll be forced to improve in order to get more revenue into the system. So we need to look at that. We need to look at it from that perspective, and that's like primary school and high school, and then I think varsity level. I think we're okay. I think those standards have not changed as much, but of course there is that insurgence of left-wing Marxism coming in, and taking over humanities and so forth, which is a challenge. But that's another issue on its own.
Cool. Yeah, I think as long as the sort of desire to interfere more isn't followed on upon by the government, we might hopefully, just by the sort of pressure of forces, as it were. I think the pandemic has also accelerated homeschooling and more school choice and that kind of thing. So let's see. Hopefully that's a trend that also picks up in South Africa. Moving on to our final item for this episode, another very interesting series of comments from a senior ANC and government representative, Minister Gwede Mantashe, but he was speaking in his capacity as ANC national chairperson. This was over the weekend when he was campaigning in Kimberley in the Northern Cape for the ANC ahead of the local government elections. Reminder, local government elections are on the 1st of November this year. But he said that government cannot solve South Africa's high unemployment rate by itself because it is a national crisis. I would argue that government can cause it, but yes, I agree, they probably can't solve it. He said, and I quote, "National government must have the responsibility to create an environment for employment. There are two things you must do if you want to deal with unemployment. Never promise government will employ everybody because it's not going to happen. Government must create an environment for people to take initiative and promote entrepreneurship," end quote. According to Mantashe, creating an environment that promotes entrepreneurship leads to job creation opportunities. So Dumo, Minister Gwede Mantashe is a radical free marketeer. What do you think of that?
If you read this to me, last week sometime, I would have been like, you're lying to me. Gwede Mantashe will never say anything like that. Never. That's what I thought. But I mean, if he's saying that, and you said you're speaking in the capacity of a ANC campaign leader and stuff like that. So it could be that he's paying lip service to it, but he's right. That is 110% correct. The government is not there to hire people. They're there to create the environment so that more businesses can come in and more people can get hired. I don't even to be honest, it's not even, would you say it's even their job to create such an environment? They don't even have to do anything. They just need to remove these regulations and just let businesses go on, and then everything else would follow. But I mean, I just find this very difficult. This is not, I don't know why they're saying it now, but this has been the formula for a very long period of time, and yet the government has not really implemented it. And I'm very worried that now I'm happy that they're saying it now, but also I'm also very worried that is this just another lip service campaign, or is this something genuine? Because if it is genuine, I hope that they act on it. But I just got a feeling that they will not. But definitely, Gwede Mantashe has. I won't be surprised if if they say like people like me have been speaking to Greta Mantashe about this, and I got him on WhatsApp, we're on the same WhatsApp group, and he saw this, and then I wouldn't be surprised if people said that. But I'm glad he has. I'm glad he has said that. But now it's now it's the next phase. Execute. How are you guys going to solve this problem? We've got a lot of policies in place that discourage investment and so forth, and make unemployment even worse and so forth. So how are you going to fix it, or not fix it? Are you going to remove those regulations? That's the key question. So glad he said it, but still skeptical on what if they are actually going to act on it or not.
No, in the context of the last 200, 300 years of colonialism and apartheid, I think South Africans should be very suspicious of anything the government tells them, and always interrogate and question what they say, whether it's someone you like or not. Let's say that your party gets into local power, the party that you favor in the next elections. Always keep them to the highest standard of free markets, rule of law, property rights, that kind of thing. Don't let them just get away with whatever because they're part of your quote unquote team. Dumo, it wouldn't surprise me if you and the minister were in the same WhatsApp group, because Manpatria is becoming ever more influential. We have to thank you for your time and your insights today. It's been a great pleasure having you on to unpack the latest week. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. Much appreciated, man.
To the viewers and listeners, we hope that you have a great weekend. Before you leave, if you enjoyed this episode, please like the video and also subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. A reminder that I will link to all of Dumo and Manpatria's links in the description below, so please go and follow them and check out all of their work and support them if you can. Until next time, take care out there, stay safe, and we'll talk to you all again very soon. Bye-bye.